This interview is being conducted for the Veterans History Project for the Library of Congress. The veteran's name is Robert Lee Honeycutt, Jr. He was born July 6, 1926. He served in the Navy in World War II and the Army during the Korean War. He achieved the rank of Seaman First Class in the Navy, and he was discharged as a corporal in the Army. We are recording this on March 11, 2016. I am Madison Martin, and I am conducting this interview. No relation. So, Mr. Honeycutt, where did you grow up?
I grew up in Charlotte, North Carolina, but I was born in Richmond, Virginia.
Okay.
And I moved to Charlotte when I was a year old.
Did you have any siblings?
I have one sister.
Was she older or younger?
She was 3 years older than I, and she's been deceased many years.
Okay. So, what was your childhood like?
Well, I grew up very, I grew up pretty normally. I played a few sports, but didn't play any organized sports in high school. One reason I had a job with the Federal Reserve Bank after school, and I worked until about 11 o'clock at night for the last 2 years I was in high school. And I played in the band for a year, and that didn't suit me, so I didn't play after the first year in junior high.
Was there a particular subject that you liked?
I always liked history. I disliked Latin. That was my downfall. Why do you laugh?
I'm actually a history major, so that's...
You what?
I'm a history major.
Oh, are you? Yeah,
I am.
I enjoy history.
So, growing up, did you have anyone in your family in the military?
My father served in World War I
Okay.
as a second lieutenant. He was a bayonet instructor of all things.
What branch?
Army.
Awesome.
And he was stationed at Seattle, Washington, Fort Lewis, Washington.
Okay.
Did not go overseas.
Okay. So, did you grow up thinking you might want to be in the military?
Not really, no.
Okay.
Not until the war started, World War II started. I had an next door neighbor that was 2 years or a couple of years older than I, and he was a Marine Corps pilot. And resultingly, that's the reason I joined the Navy Air Corps when I was 17.
Okay, so you did enlist.
I dropped out of high school as a senior, but I never flew.
So, did you have any friends that were drafted?
Just about all of my friends went into the service, except one or two that were not physically able to go into the service.
Mm-hmm. Looking back, do you think that we should have a draft today or not?
I think we should.
Is there a particular reason, or?
Because I was drafted in the Army.
During the Korean War?
I spent, when I went into the Navy at 17, I was assigned to college. I was in uniform, and they sent me to a small college in Tennessee, Carson Newman College, which was a pre-flight school. And we took some Navy subjects and some standard business courses. And I stayed there about a year and a half, and never got to pre-flight. Mm-hmm. And the war ended, and should I go ahead or should I wait on your question?
Yes, it's totally up to whatever you'd like to say.
When the war ended, they sent me to Great Lakes for a few months as a mess cook, if you can believe it. I was a seaman at that time. And they later assigned me to the USS Houston, a light cruiser that was on a training mission in the Atlantic out of New York City. And I stayed on there 2 or 3 months, but they were going to go on a around the world cruise, and so I was due to get out that summer. So they transferred me to another ship, which it was an LSM, a landing ship mechanized, traveling from Newport, Rhode Island to Guantanamo, Cuba, hauling picket boats. And I was the helmsman of the ship. I was a seaman. And we had 2 or 3 officers and about 15 crewmen on board that ship. It was a flat-bottom ship, and I remember the Atlantic Ocean was awfully rough because the ship would go up like this and come down, bam, bam, and it was not a pleasant ship to be on.
Did you ever get seasick?
I did not. I'll get at that later when I go into the Army.
So when you first put on your uniform in the Navy, what was that experience like? Like, how did you feel when you first put on that uniform?
Well, I was very proud to be in the service. Of course, I was only 17 years old.
Were you nervous at all?
Well, not really. I guess you had some nervous moments going into the service at that age, but it passed. I got awfully tired of being in school during the war, but I couldn't do much about it.
So what year did you enlist?
Enlist, 1940, let me think, 44.
During the war, did you ever keep a journal or write things down or write letters to your family or friends?
I wrote letters to my parents when I was in the Navy and later in the Army, and I had a shoebox full of letters about that I destroyed when I moved out here. Can you believe it? I destroyed them all. I just felt like I'd kept them long enough. I reread them occasionally, but it was too long ago.
So when the war was over and you were still in service, did you ever meet up with your friends and talk about what had happened?
Occasionally.
Were they also in the Navy or the Army or what branch?
My friends were in both the Army and Navy. I was discharged in, let me think, 1946. And I went back to college after I got out and graduated from Duke in 1949.
What did you study there?
Accounting, business.
What was appealing to that major to you?
Accounting primarily. What was appealing
Yes, sir. Appealing.
about the courses I took?
Is there a particular job that you wanted to have after the Navy?
Well, I really didn't have any particular job. I thought about going into public accounting, but I never got into that position. I went to work for, after I graduated, with General Motors Acceptance Corporation, which were the financing people for General Motors. They financed automobiles for individuals, and we financed automobiles for dealers on their floor plans. And I spent 39 years with them. I went back with them after I got out of the Army.
So, When did you meet Ruthie?
Did I what?
When did you meet your wife?
I met my wife a week after I was discharged from the Army in 1953 on a blind date. And apparently we got married the following year in 1954.
Wow. Was that a friend or a coworker that
A
had said
friend
that?
introduced us.
That's great.
She said I was extremely nervous because I'd been in the Army, say, a couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
I'll go back to the Army. Shall I go back to the Army? I got drafted in the Army in 1951.
How did you feel about being drafted?
Well, the reason, I was a little bit unhappy about it because I'd been in the Navy, but they excluded the time I'd been in college in the Navy and reclassified me as 1A. And I tried to go back into the Navy, but they would only take me if I would go in with a 4-year enlistment, and I was already 24 years old. I didn't want to go in that long. So I took my chances on going to the Army for a couple of years. And it worked out pretty good. I went to, the first thing they did, when I was drafted, I was living in Charlotte. And they gave me the order for about 100 men, and I had to take them by train up to Fort Hollywood, Maryland, since I had had previous service. And it was sort of a hard job to keep 100 guys in the best behavior on the train, really, if I put it that way. But we got there. I had to get a couple of guys picked up by the MPs that were lying on the floor of the train, wouldn't get up. So we got to Fort Hollywood, Maryland, and were processed, and they sent me to Camp Jackson, South Carolina for infantry basic. And I started infantry basic, and after 6 weeks, they called me one day off the range and said, would you be interested in going to the Army Finance School? I said, well, with my background, I would love to go. So they sent me to Fort Ben Harrison, Indiana, for several months. And I finished pretty well there at that school and thought I would stay in the States for the rest of my 2-year enlistment. But I went straight to Korea and spent about 1.5 years over there. Coldest place I've ever been in my life, 35 and 40 below zero. Spent 2 winters over there. I did not see any combat, but I was about 10 miles back of combat. I was stationed at 10th Corps headquarters and did finance work. I did handle the payroll for the troops in 10th Corps and also the Korean troops.
That's impressive.
Have I covered everything?
Well, I just have a couple more questions.
Okay.
Being that close to combat, was that, how was that for you, knowing that it was so close?
Well, I could hear artillery at night, most nights. 10th Corps had gone into Korea up at Incheon, and then they went north up to the Yalu River before I got there. Then the Chinese troops came into the war with the North Koreans. They pushed 10th Corps back south all the way almost off the peninsula. And then they made their way back north up to about the 38th parallel. That's where I met 10th Corps. So we were pretty stationary when I joined 10th Corps. And other than hearing the artillery at night, I didn't think too much about it. I used to drive a Jeep all over the place by myself, and foolishly, I guess. I could have gotten in a lot of trouble, probably.
What was it like knowing that you were in a foreign country, where, yes, you were surrounded by fellow American troops, but you were still on someone else's territory?
Well, I felt quite different. I felt very comfortable with the troops around. Like I say, I never saw any combat. I was quite fortunate in that respect.
Did you have friends that served in the Korean War as well?
I did not have that many friends that served in the Korean War.
So, when was it that you came home from Korea?
I came home from Korea January 1953, and that's when I had the blind date with Ruth a week later. And we dated that spring, and then she went off to New York City that summer, and we sort of fell apart and got back together the following fall and got married the following year. Those things happen.
Where did you guys get married?
We got married in June 1954. I made the mistake one night when we were dating. I said, Ruth, I don't know exactly how to say this to you, but I think I'm falling in love with you. And she said, take me home now. When I said the word, I think. But we did get together. We've been married since 1954, 62 years. That's a long time.
That's amazing. Where did you guys end up moving to once you were married?
We got married and lived in Charlotte for about a year. Then I was transferred to Chattanooga, and we lived there until we came out here. I went through all the normal steps with GMAC. I was sales manager, credit manager, accounting manager first, and I became branch manager in 1982 and retired in 1988. And one of the things that you might find interesting, after we were both retired, I don't know if you've ever heard of the Elder Hostel program or the Rhodes Scholar program. Have you ever heard of that?
I have.
Have you ever heard of the Rhodes Scholar program?
Yes, sir.
We did 50 some out of the
Wow.
Elder Hostels, mostly overseas. We would go over to, usually for about a week or two at a time. And we'd go in and we'd take classes and learn something about the country and have physical activities. Our favorite one was we did a 2-week hike in England, a week in Cornwall, a week in Cotswold, back when we were able to hike. That was a year after 9/11. Are you familiar with 9/11?
Yes, sir.
And we were on a cruise up in Newfoundland on 9/11, and we were walking in a little city up there, and this woman came up to us and said, have you heard what's happening in New York City? And I said, no, we have not. She said, there's a plane crashed into the Empire State Building. And she thought it was an accident. And we didn't find out until later that it was a terror attack. So we had a problem getting back to Chattanooga. We had to catch a train to Boston, and we caught a plane finally back to Chattanooga through Atlanta with 15 passengers on board a large plane. And I think there were about 20 stewardess on board with us, trying to get places. People were scared to fly. And there was a very suspicious looking guy sitting across the aisle from us that we found out later was a Georgia Tech student. He was harmless. And we kept our eye on him all the way down.
Coming from a time where there was conventional warfare, how does terrorism make you feel now?
How does it make me feel now? Well, I'm quite concerned about the politics today. I'm not too fond of what's going on. I don't want to get into personalities, but I'm not real happy with who's running on either side, if you're pardon the expression.
Oh, no, no. We probably agree.
I don't know. I feel like it could happen again over here like it did on 9/11. Hopefully never.
So you and your wife ended up living in Tennessee. How long have you guys, or did you guys live there before coming here to South Carolina?
We got married in 1954, and we lived in Tennessee until this past October when we moved here. We lived in Chattanooga, as a matter of fact. We started housekeeping in Chattanooga.
How many kids did you and your wife have, or have?
How many what?
How many children?
We have 3 sons. We have one son who is 60 years old. He lives in Asheville, North Carolina. He's an electrical engineer. We have a son who is 59, I believe. He's a Lutheran minister in Walhalla, South Carolina, which is pretty close to that. He's the reason we're here. And our youngest son taught college in Iowa State University in Ames, Iowa for 15 or 20 years, but he got tired of teaching the younger generation today that don't want to learn, he said, so he quit teaching, and he's now gone into business developing websites, if you know what that is, and
Yes, sir.
he's doing quite well with it.
How many grandchildren?
5.
5. How old are they?
Let's see, one's 32, one's 30, and the others are in their 20s. 3. We have 2 adopted grandchildren and 3. We have adopted granddaughter and adopted grandson, and 1 granddaughter by birth and 2 grandsons. They're the sons of my oldest son who lives in Asheville. And they're scattered. They live, one lives in Charlotte, one lives in Idaho. If you know where Idaho is.
Yes, sir.
Where is it?
Midwest, I
Okay.
believe. North Midwest.
Yeah.
So you guys seem to have a big family. That's great.
Well, we've got some grandkids that we wish, we only have 1 grandchild that's married, and we have 4 others that we wish would get married. And there's time. They've had, so one of them has been married and divorced, and he's dating a girl I hope he will marry, and the grandson is still in college, one of them is still in college. And the 3rd grandson is in Charlotte working with a company. He flies all over the world. I don't know what he does really. He's quite successful in whatever he's doing. And I have the other granddaughter that's, she's a prosecuting attorney in Columbia, South Carolina. If you can imagine. And the other granddaughter is a teacher.
Okay.
I don't know how I got a granddaughter to be a prosecuting attorney, but she she's doing quite well with it, really.
When you look back on your life, what are the defining moments for you?
Well, I'm not saying this just because Bruce in the next room, but the fact that we met and got married, I guess our marriage has been quite wonderful as far as I'm concerned.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it hasn't been always rosy, but it's been a wonderful marriage.
Mm-hmm.
When you're together with a woman for 62 years, it has to be successful. Agree?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
You're married?
Engaged.
Engaged?
Yes, sir.
Well, when you're 62 years married, you know what I'm talking
That's
about.
right. I have that to look forward to.
When you look back on this period of international conflict that you lived through, between World War I with your father and World War II with your service and your friend's service and people that you knew, as well as the Korean War and later on, how was living during that time of such international conflict?
Well, you know, when the World War II ended, you thought that would be the end of all wars. That was the assumption and the hope and the belief of many people. And then when the Korean War started, it just it shattered a lot of people's hopes and dreams about peace. And then after that, the Vietnam War, I never got involved in that, but a lot of kids did and got killed over there.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know where the wars end, really.
Mm-hmm. How did you feel about the Vietnam War after serving in Korea?
How do I feel about the Vietnam War?
How did you at the time?
Well, I really felt like it was. I didn't understand why we got involved in Vietnam, to be honest with you. I don't know what our purpose was of going into Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember the year, and I don't remember the political aspects of it.
Mm-hmm.
When did it start? Do you remember?
I don't know the specific year.
When did Korea?
66. I was born in 68, so I think it started in 66 and ended in 73. Correct?
I can't recall that much about Vietnam.
It probably
But it
was
went-
the 60s.
It was in the.
I know I had 3 sons, and 2 of them had. One of them had extremely low draft number, something like in the 20s. But
Wow.
they quit drafting the year he'd been eligible to go.
Wow.
And the other son, none of my 3 grandsons, my 3 sons served in the military. Hopefully,
Mm-hmm.
wonderfully.
Mm-hmm. How do you feel about the military tradition of your generation?
How do I feel about the military tradition of my generation?
Yes, sir.
Well, in my generation, it was just kids my age. Really, you didn't think that much about it. You just served because you were either drafted or you enlisted because it was a thing to do. I mean, There wasn't any question about whether you would go into the military.
Did your parents accept that fact, or?
Well, they had to give me permission to enlist in the Navy when I was 17, because I couldn't enlist on my own until I was 18.
Did you feel like it was your duty to serve?
I did. I don't feel like I contributed as much as I could have, because I didn't see combat, and I didn't see any military engagements that a lot of them did. But I did serve, and I'm proud of the fact that I did.
We thank you so much for your service. As we close, is there any lasting words of wisdom or things you would like to say?
I don't know of anything I can add. I wish I could get somebody to file my income tax for me. I don't see at all anymore. I can't write my name and read it. So I'm having a hard time with taxes, and I'm gonna have to find somebody to file for me this year. I filed last year, but it's a struggle. I can't even get everything together to give it to somebody to file for me. Do you file your own taxes?
No, sir, I have an accountant in Wahala.
Do you?
Yes, sir.
Henry, the bus driver, is going to find me an accountant, I think, that he's familiar with.
Good,
He's
yes.
been a lot of help to my wife and I.
He's wonderful.
He really is. He's a do you know
genuine.
Henry?
No, sir.
He's a good friend of ours, really.
That's great.
He's helped me. I had to get since I haven't driven in 3 or 4 years, and we sold our car. We don't have a car anymore. And we had to get photo IDs. I had a bank account at Wells Fargo with checking account, and Ruth could not put a check into my account until she had a photo ID. So we had to get we had to go over to the driver's license bureau, and Henry took us over there and we went over there, we had to go back home and get birth certificates and passports and everything we owned to go back over there and get a photo ID. It's ridiculous. She couldn't even open a checking account without a photo ID.
It's ridiculous.
And at that time, when I opened my account, I had a driver's license. I had not destroyed it.
Right.
But she didn't. She tore hers up. When she quit driving, she destroyed hers.